There's a strange imbalance of power in every room you've ever walked into. Someone is talking too much. Someone is explaining themselves. Someone is desperate to be understood. And someone, quiet, unreadable, almost boring, is winning. Not because they are louder, not because they are smarter, but because you can't place them. Their silence feels intentional. Their pauses feel calculated. You don't know what they want, what they think, or what they'll do next. And that uncertainty does something unsettling to the human mind. It fills the gaps for them. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never realize until it's too late. Power doesn't belong to the most visible. It belongs to the most ambiguous. We are biologically wired to fear the unknown more than the known threat. A barking dog is less terrifying than the one staring silently from the dark. The brain cannot relax without patterns, and mysterious people refuse to give you any. So you project, you speculate, you overthink, and while you're busy guessing, they're observing. Strategic ambiguity isn't accidental. It's not social awkwardness. It's not introversion, and it's definitely not shyness. It is a psychological position, one that turns human curiosity into leverage. Think about it. Why do the most influential figures rarely explain themselves fully? Why do master negotiators speak less than they listen? Why does unpredictability dominate politics, business, and even romantic power dynamics? Because clarity makes you predictable, and predictability makes you controllable. Now pause for a second and be honest with yourself. Have you ever overshared and immediately felt weaker? Explained your intentions and watched your leverage evaporate? Revealed your plans only to feel exposed, even sabotaged? That wasn't bad luck. That was psychology. Mysterious people hold all the cards because they let others play the game blind. And here's the twist most self-help advice gets wrong. This isn't about manipulation for manipulation's sake. It's about understanding how the human mind assigns power and learning how to stop giving yours away. In a world obsessed with transparency, authenticity, and being seen, strategic ambiguity feels almost rebellious, even immoral. But history doesn't reward the most honest. It rewards the most unreadable. And no, this doesn't mean becoming silent like a monk who ghosted society. Relax. We're not deleting your personality. What it means is learning when to speak, when to withhold, and when silence does the real talking. Because once you understand why mystery destabilizes others and stabilizes you, you'll never rush to explain yourself again. And that realization? That's where the real power game begins. Before power becomes strategy, it begins as biology. Long before titles, money, or influence existed, the human brain learned one brutal lesson. What you cannot predict can kill you. Your nervous system did not evolve to reward clarity. It evolved to scan for danger. And nothing triggers that ancient alarm faster than ambiguity. A clear threat allows preparation. An unclear one forces imagination. And imagination is always more terrifying than reality. This is the first law of psychological power. The unknown occupies more mental space than the known. When someone is transparent, your brain relaxes. You categorize them, label them, file them away. But when someone remains unreadable, the brain refuses to close the file. It keeps looping. What do they really think? Why didn't they react? What are they hiding? What do they know that I don't? This is not curiosity. It's cognitive captivity. Carl Jung hinted at this when he spoke about projection. When the mind lacks information, it doesn't pause. It fills the gap. And what it fills it with is not truth, but fear, desire, suspicion, and fantasy. In other words, mysterious people don't control others directly. Others control themselves for them. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable. The average person believes that being understood is power. But psychologically, being understood makes you manageable. Once people understand you, they know how you'll react, what motivates you, what scares you, what you'll tolerate. And once those variables are mapped, leverage shifts. This is why Machiavelli warned that visibility invites manipulation, not because openness is immoral, but because it is strategically naive. The moment people can predict you, they can delay you, distract you, imitate you, undermine you. Predictability is the tax paid by the transparent. Mystery, on the other hand, creates asymmetry, and asymmetry is where power hides. Think of the last time someone gave you too little information: a vague email, a delayed reply, a calm silence after a confrontation. Did you feel relaxed? Or did your mind start racing, constructing scenarios, intentions, meanings? Exactly. Ambiguity hijacks attention. Your brain hates unfinished patterns. It craves closure the way lungs crave oxygen. This is why unresolved tension keeps people awake at night, and why silence after a message can feel louder than a paragraph. Mysterious individuals weaponize this without saying a word. They don't rush to clarify. They don't correct assumptions. They don't explain their silence. They allow you to do the psychological labor. And here's the brutal irony. The more intelligent the person observing them, the deeper the trap works. Because intelligent minds generate more complex interpretations. They overanalyze. They assume depth. They assign intention even where none was given. This is why strategic ambiguity is especially powerful among educated, ambitious, and intellectually driven people. Now pause for a second. If mystery is so powerful, why doesn't everyone use it? Because ambiguity is psychologically expensive. Most people can't tolerate being misunderstood. It triggers anxiety, insecurity, the need for validation, the urge to explain, defend, justify. Silence feels like social death to those who depend on external reassurance. Mysterious people survive that discomfort. They resist the itch to clarify. They don't chase approval. That alone places them in a different psychological class. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the strongest man is the one who remains unmoved by others' opinions. Strategic ambiguity is the modern execution of that idea. When you don't react immediately, when you don't reveal your stance, when you don't rush to show your hand, you flip the power dynamic. Others begin to seek your response, your validation, your clarity. And the moment people wait on you psychologically, you've already won the first battle. But there's a darker layer to this. Humans instinctively associate mystery with depth. We assume what is hidden must be valuable, rare, important. Why do people trust the quiet one in the room more than the loud one? Why does restraint feel intelligent? Why does emotional control look like authority? Because scarcity creates value, and information is no different. Leonardo da Vinci understood this intuitively. He warned that revealing intentions too early invites interference. When plans are public, they become vulnerable. When thoughts are exposed, they can be distorted. Silence protects momentum. Mystery preserves optionality, and optionality is the highest form of freedom. Strategic ambiguity doesn't just control others, it does something far more dangerous. It reshapes how you think. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin acting more deliberately. When you stop seeking understanding, you become harder to manipulate. When you stop broadcasting intentions, you regain internal clarity. Mystery doesn't make you deceptive, it makes you powerful. And in Act 2, we're going to expose how this psychological advantage scales from individual interactions to power structures in leadership, negotiation, and social dominance, and why those who reveal the least often decide the most. Mystery begins as a psychological effect, but it becomes real power only when it scales. This is where most people misunderstand strategic ambiguity. They think it's about being quiet, about saying less, about appearing deep. That's amateur thinking. True strategic ambiguity isn't passive, it's directional. It doesn't hide everything, only what would reduce leverage. And this is where power dynamics quietly reverse. Let's step into a familiar setting, a negotiation, a workplace hierarchy, a social group, even a relationship. There is always one person who speaks first, explains more, reveals motives, clarifies boundaries. And then there is one who waits. The first is reactive, the second is positional. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. The one who reacts is already behind. Reaction exposes intention. Intention reveals dependency. Dependency invites control. Strategic ambiguity delays reaction, and delay forces others to reveal themselves. This is the hidden function of silence. It extracts information without giving any in return. When you don't immediately state your position, people fill the vacuum with their own disclosures. They over-explain, they justify, they negotiate against themselves. This is why the most powerful negotiators speak last, not because they are clever, but because they allow others to exhaust their leverage first. Now, let's talk about hierarchy. In any group, corporate, political, or social, status is not determined by who works hardest. It's determined by who sets the frame. The frame answers questions like, what matters here? What's acceptable? What's being evaluated? Who decides? Mysterious individuals rarely explain their frame. They let others guess, and guessing places you psychologically below the frame holder. Why? Because clarity flows downward. Authority doesn't rush to explain itself. It expects others to adapt. This is why leaders who constantly justify decisions feel weaker than those who don't. The more you explain, the more you invite debate. The more you invite debate, the more you dilute authority. Marcus Aurelius warned against being enslaved by the need to appear reasonable to everyone, not because reason is bad, but because performative explanation erodes internal command. Strategic ambiguity preserves command. Now, here's where things get darker and more interesting. People don't just respond to ambiguity with curiosity. They respond with deference. When someone remains unreadable, we instinctively assume they have access to information we don't. That assumption elevates them psychologically. This is why silence is often mistaken for wisdom, why restraint feels powerful, why emotional opacity intimidates. Schopenhauer observed that humans judge depth not by content, but by resistance. What resists understanding feels superior. Mysterious people resist being decoded, and resistance creates hierarchy. But here's the part no one likes to admit. Strategic ambiguity also functions as a defensive weapon. When people can't read you, they can't easily attack you. They don't know which angle hurts, which incentive works, which pressure point to exploit. Ambiguity collapses manipulation attempts before they begin. This is why highly manipulative personalities often overshare early to map you. And this is why withholding personal data, emotional reactions, and long-term intentions is not cold, it's protective. Think of strategic ambiguity as psychological armor, not rigid, not aggressive, but adaptive. Pause for a second. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, why did I say all that? Exactly. Your instinct wasn't wrong, it just wasn't strategic. Oversharing creates temporary relief and long-term vulnerability. Mysterious people feel the same urge, but they don't obey it. And because they don't, something subtle happens. People begin to seek access to them, not physically, psychologically. They want reactions, validation, approval, insight. And the moment someone seeks access, the power balance tilts. Leonardo da Vinci warned that those who reveal plans prematurely invite resistance. The same applies socially. The less people know about your direction, the fewer obstacles they can place in your path. Ambiguity preserves momentum. Now let's connect the dots. Strategic ambiguity extracts information without giving it, forces others to self-disclose, establishes hierarchy without force, neutralizes manipulation, preserves optionality. But there's a part no one likes to talk about. Used incorrectly, Ambiguity doesn't create power, it creates isolation. And that paradox is where this gets uncomfortable. And in Act 3, we'll confront this final paradox: how mysterious people walk a razor's edge between authority and alienation, and how to wield ambiguity without becoming invisible, misunderstood, or alone.
By now, the advantage of strategic ambiguity should be clear. Mystery commands attention. Silence extracts information. Unpredictability destabilizes opponents. But here's the part most people never talk about because it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, and slightly terrifying. Every form of power has a price, and the price of mystery is distance. Not emotional distance at first, psychological distance. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop reacting on demand, when you stop revealing your inner world, you don't just become harder to read, you become harder to reach. This is where many who discover strategic ambiguity for the first time make a fatal mistake. They swing too far. They confuse opacity with absence, silence with withdrawal, mystery with emotional vacancy. And instead of power, they get isolation. This is the paradox of the mysterious individual. The same ambiguity that elevates you in the eyes of many can quietly disconnect you from everyone. So let's dismantle the myth before it hardens into something dangerous. Strategic ambiguity is not about becoming invisible. It's about becoming selectively visible. The goal is not to reveal nothing. The goal is to reveal what strengthens your position and withhold what weakens it. This distinction matters more than anything else in this entire discussion. Carl Jung warned that when the persona becomes too rigid, the self begins to suffocate. When you wear the mask too long, you forget where it ends and you begin. Mysterious people who never lower the mask don't become powerful. They become hollow. True strategic ambiguity is dynamic. It breathes. It knows when to remain silent and when to speak with precision. Think of it like this. A locked vault is impressive, but a vault that never opens becomes irrelevant. Power isn't built on permanent concealment. It's built on controlled access. This is where most people fail. They either overshare everything to everyone or withhold everything from everyone. Both extremes are weaknesses. The first creates exploitation. The second creates alienation. The masters of strategic ambiguity do something different. They tier access. Surface-level clarity for the masses, selective depth for the trusted, inner truth for almost no one. This structure protects power while preserving connection. And here's the darker truth most won't admit. Not everyone deserves access to you. Your plans, your fears, your doubts, your long-term intentions. When you give those away indiscriminately, you aren't being authentic, you're being careless. Schopenhauer believed that intimacy without discernment leads to suffering, not because humans are evil, but because they are self-interested. Information, once given, is never neutral. This is why strategic ambiguity is not manipulation. It is boundary enforcement at the psychological level. Now, let's talk about loneliness, because it inevitably enters the conversation. Highly strategic, intelligent, self-contained individuals often experience a specific kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being unseen. People admire them, respect them, sometimes fear them, but rarely understand them. And here's the uncomfortable realization that separates amateurs from masters. You cannot be both universally understood and strategically powerful. Those two goals are in direct conflict. The need to be understood by everyone is the death of leverage. Marcus Aurelius accepted this fully. He did not seek validation from the crowd. He focused on internal coherence, being aligned with his values regardless of perception. Strategic ambiguity requires the same discipline. You must become comfortable with being misinterpreted, being underestimated, being projected onto, because those projections often work in your favor. But, and this is critical,
you must also know where to place your truth. A mysterious person with no inner circle becomes brittle. A mysterious person with one or two trusted anchors becomes unshakable. This is where emotional intelligence meets dark psychology. You don't eliminate vulnerability, you relocate it. And that relocation is what keeps you human. Before we go any further, ask yourself this honestly. How much of what you say is meant to clarify, and how much is meant to soothe anxiety? Most people speak not to communicate, but to relieve discomfort. Silence feels like tension, so they fill it. Ambiguity feels unsafe, so they explain. Strategic individuals tolerate that discomfort. They let silence sit. They let ambiguity breathe. They let others reveal themselves. And because of that tolerance, they gain something rare: psychological independence. They are no longer pulled by the need to be liked, understood, or approved. Their actions become deliberate instead of reactive. Their words gain weight because they are not constant. And that brings us to the final truth of strategic ambiguity. It is not a tactic, it is a temperament. It requires patience, emotional regulation, internal authority. Without those, mystery collapses into confusion or coldness. But with them, mystery becomes gravity. People lean in. They listen harder. They wait for your move. And when you finally speak, it matters. In the conclusion, we'll bring everything together. How to integrate strategic ambiguity into your life without losing your humanity. Why intelligence often pushes people toward mystery and loneliness. And how this connects directly to your next evolution.
By now, the pattern should be unmistakable. Mysterious people don't dominate rooms by force. They don't overpower conversations. They don't demand attention. They bend attention. Strategic ambiguity works because it aligns with how the human mind assigns power. We fear what we can't predict. We respect what resists decoding. We defer to what feels self-contained. And, most importantly, we project depth onto what doesn't beg to be seen. But let's strip away the romanticism and leave you with something real, something usable. Strategic ambiguity is not about becoming silent. It's about becoming intentional. Every word you speak either clarifies your position or collapses your leverage. Every explanation either strengthens your frame or hands control to someone else. Power doesn't disappear when you stop explaining yourself. It consolidates. This is why the most dangerous people in history weren't the loudest. They were the ones whose intentions couldn't be fully mapped. The ones who revealed outcomes, but not process. Direction, but not doubt. And here's the final truth most people miss. The world doesn't reward transparency. It rewards coherence. When your actions are aligned, you don't need constant explanation. When your identity is stable, you don't rush to prove it. When your inner world is ordered, mystery forms naturally. That's why strategic ambiguity isn't a trick you perform. It's a byproduct of internal authority. You stop talking because you no longer need permission. You stop oversharing because you trust your trajectory. You stop reacting because you're no longer emotionally rentable. And yes, this path narrows your circle. You will be misunderstood. You will be projected onto. You will sometimes feel alone even in a crowded room. But here's the paradox that defines intelligent, powerful minds. The same awareness that makes you strategic also makes you solitary. And that loneliness isn't a flaw, it's a signal. A signal that your mind operates ahead of the emotional economy most people live in. Which is why the next evolution isn't learning more tactics. It's learning how intelligence reshapes your emotional landscape. If today's video showed you how mystery creates power, then the next one explores the cost of that power and why sharp minds so often feel isolated inside it. Watch how intelligence breeds existential loneliness. Because once you stop explaining yourself to the world, the real question becomes whether the world still understands you at all.
And that's where the deeper game truly begins.